President Kennedy was the 35th president sworn in on January 20th, 1961, famously saying,
"And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country."
On October 14, 1962, the Cuban Missile Crisis began when American planes photographed missile sites under construction. America was under the serious threat of nuclear war. President Kennedy proposed a naval blockade despite the advice from his cabinet to order an airstrike. After 5 tense days, Khrushchev agreed to remove Soviet missiles from Cuba in exchange for the assurance that America would not invade Cuba. In Vietnam, Kennedy was using very moderate military action. He only sent military advisors to help train the South Vietnamese. Support in Vietnam gradually increased to the point where troops were actually fighting against the Northern Vietnamese. According to statements made by Kennedy's Secretary of State, Robert McNamara, he had intended to pull out of Vietnam after the elections of 1964. If Kennedy had lived long enough to make it to 1964 and had actually removed the troops from Vietnam, the rebellious subculture that formed in America might not have ever occurred. By the 1960s, segregation in school had been legally abolished, although many communities in the South were slow to change. However, segregation in restaurants, on buses, bathrooms, and other public places still remained intact. Kennedy supported the Civil Rights Movement, and in 1962, when students of the University of Mississippi prevented James Meredith from enrolling, Kennedy was furious. Kennedy responded by sending 400 federal marshals and 3,000 troops to ensure that James Meredith could enroll in his first class. In 1957, when the Soviet Union launched Sputnik, the first satellite, the world was amazed. When the Soviet Union announced that Yuri Gagarin, a cosmonaut, had made the first manned orbital flight around the world was more amazed. During Kennedy's inaugural address, he vowed to help America's underfunded and understaffed space program catch up with that of the Soviet Union. In the autumn of 1963, Khrushchev agreed to a joint venture to the moon. Unfortunately, Kennedy died before the agreement could be finalized. John Kennedy was shot and killed in Dallas, Texas on November 22, 1963, by Lee Harvey Oswald while riding in a presidential motorcade with his wife, Jacqueline, through Dealey Plaza. The death of the president plunged the United States into mourning.
John F. Kennedy died at approximately 1 o'clock Central Standard Time today here in Dallas. He died of a gunshot wound.
Kennedy's brief presidency gave a sense of optimism, and few could accept that he was really gone. The reaction to this young president's death was incredible. In streets all over the world, people were crying, churches all over held special observances, and media sources provided minute-by-minute updates. President Kennedy was buried in Arlington National Cemetery, Virginia.